The Autism Research Institute relies on the generosity of donors like you to make this webcast possible. If you enjoy this presentation, please consider making a donation. Thank you.
Now, before we get started, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Our speaker is a postdoctoral fellow with the UCLA Amundsen Lovelace Brain Mapping Center and the UCLA PEERS Clinic at the Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. Her primary research interests lie in multimodal imaging studies of social cognition and ASD. She is also a clinical neuropsychology fellow and medical psychology assessment center at the UCLA Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. These webinars are made possible through a generous donation from local 25 Boston Teamsters. If you would like to contribute, please visit our website at autism.com.
Thank you, Denise. So today I'm going to be talking about the UCLA PEERS program and focusing primarily on the conversation skills that we teach through our program. So some of the more common conversation difficulties that we see with youth with autism spectrum disorders includes poor social communication. So that involves problems with topic initiation, knowing what kind of topics to talk about with their peers and how to get started. What often happens is they may tend to use repetitive themes. So they might perseverate on their own restricted interests or their topics of interest and usually tend to disregard what may be the other person's interests in that conversation. So what ends up happening is they have a lot of one-sided conversations. So it's either based on the topic that they might be interested in talking about with little coming from the other person in that conversation. Or on the other hand, if it is a topic that they're not that interested in, they might not give a lot of extended responses. So you might just, the other person in the conversation might find it hard to get responses back if it's a topic that they are not very interested in. So this ends up, having them not identify as many common interests with their peers, which is kind of a key factor in developing friendships. Most of us, are friends with people that we share some common interests with. So identifying those common interests is important in these social conversations. Sometimes they might have difficulty providing relevant information. So they might be asked something about a topic and they might not know a lot about that topic or not be as interested in that topic, so might not provide the relevant information. Or they may make unexpected leaps in topics, so just provide very brief responses and then move on to things that they are more interested in talking about. Other factors in these conversation difficulties include more nonverbal kinds of difficulties. So prosody, which is kind of your intonation of speech, is something that's impacted in youth with autism spectrum disorders. So they tend to have sometimes a pedantic style of speaking. So that's kind of what we refer to as like a professorial sort of speech. It's like they're giving a lecture. And that comes from that poor speech prosody. Other times we find kids on the spectrum be highly verbose. So it's really hard to interrupt them. They keep going on and on about a topic and they don't really pick up as much on social cues about, the other person maybe not being as interested in that and hence continue along that topic. They also have difficulty interpreting verbal and nonverbal social cues, right? So it's hard for them to read the other person's tone of voice. Sometimes it's hard for them to understand sarcasm. They might take it too literally. Gestures are hard for them to understand sometimes, or they're just not paying as much attention to gestures. And social touch is something that kind of varies across the spectrum. We do get a fair share of youth that are sort of aversive to social touch. So these are some of the main topics we kind of want to address through our lessons on conversation skills. And the way we do that is by thinking about what are the kind of conversation skills that would be ecologically valid. And what that means is how would that translate to their real world outside of the treatment intervention that they do with us. So we want to create some do's or steps based on ecologically valid social skills. And we want to also highlight to them what are some common social errors that they might be making, or youth with autism spectrum disorders might be making. And those are what we call the don'ts. So we create rules around the ecologically valid skills and social errors, and then we break down the steps into concrete paths. So as you can see, there's sort of a picture here. We break down, this is a simple phone conversation topic, and we break it down by each step so that it's easier for them to follow through. So I'm going to give you some clinical examples here through video, but get started with, we want to think about what are some common social errors committed by teens with autism spectrum disorders when talking to others. So we kind of already talked about some of them, but I'm going to show you some clinical examples of what we often find in our clinical population here. So watch this first role play video, and you want to look out for what Alina, our actor Alina, is doing wrong in this video.
Hey Allison, how was your weekend?
It was really good. How was yours?
It was really good. Yeah, I went to go see the new sci-fi movie with my friends, and it was such a good movie.
Yeah.
We had a great time.
Where
and then we
it?
got a lot of popcorn and chocolate, and we had such a good time. And after that, we all went to dinner together, and we went to my favorite pizza place, and we got the best pizza, and it was huge. It was so big, and I had half of it. And then after that, we had a sleepover, and we stayed up all night, and I stayed up the latest. I stayed up till 3 in the morning, and now I'm super tired. And I have so much to do today. I'm gonna go swimming, and then after that I'm gonna walk my dog to the park. It's my favorite park by my house, and yeah, I'm really excited. I have a really long day, but I'm really tired because last night I stayed up really late, and it was fun.
So, all right, so the first thing we do in our groups after we show them the video is talk about what was that like for the other person. So that would be Allison in this video, and we want to think about what that was like for her. So we have this as a group discussion. We want our teens on the spectrum to sort of generate some ideas, and we help them out with the ideas. So typically what we get for that would be oh, that was boring for the other person. She really didn't get to speak because Alina kind of took over the conversation. Then the next question would be, what did she think of Alina? And that would be, usually we get, oh, she thought she was rude, or she was very chatty, or she was kind of selfish in the conversation is what we might typically get. Okay. And then we finally ask them, would she want to talk to Alina again? And usually we say, probably not, because she really didn't get to say much in that conversation. So this is one of the common conversational errors that we highlight. We call it conversation hogging. So that includes, having those one-sided conversations, failing to identify common interests with the other person, maybe using repetitive themes, just talking about your own interests. Alina didn't really do much to find out what Allison's interests were in that conversation. So that's what we call conversation hogging, and the rule in peers is don't be a conversation hog. So now let's watch this next role play and see what Alina does wrong this time.
Hey Allison, how was your weekend?
It was really good. How was yours?
Fine. What'd you do?
And I went to the movies with some friends.
Oh yeah? What movie did you see?
Just the new sci-fi movie.
Oh yeah, did you like it?
I did. Have you seen it?
Which movie theater did you go to?
Just my neighborhood one.
Oh, do you go there often?
I do. Have you ever been?
Who do you usually go with?
Just friends.
Okay. What do you and your friends do other than go to the movies?
Go out to eat.
Oh, what kind of food do you like to eat?
Italian food.
Oh, so do you like pizza or pasta?
Both.
Oh. Do you like Chinese food?
Sure.
Oh yeah? What's your favorite kind of Chinese food?
All of it.
Okay. What other food do you like?
I don't know.
Right, so it almost sounds like she's interviewing Allison in this role play. So she's definitely interested in finding out more about Allison, but it's almost coming across as an interview. It's not really a reciprocal conversation. So some of our teens on the spectrum tend to do this a lot, and they might ask a series of unrelated questions or make some leaps in questions or topics. They're not really providing a lot of personal information themselves, and that might be something that's difficult for them. So again, this is a one-sided conversation where there's a lot of pressure on Allison to come up with the responses. So as you can see in the video, she tends to lose interest in that conversation after a while because nobody really likes to be interviewed that much. So that's our second rule, and the rule would be don't be an interviewer. So now we're going to watch the next one and see again what Alina does wrong in this conversation.
Hey Allison, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, it's actually I'm doing well, because good is an adjective and well is an adverb, and in this case you're supposed to use the adverb, so it's I'm doing well.
Oh, okay. I'm doing well.
Yeah, well it's just for you. So how was your weekend?
Fine.
What'd you do?
Just hung out with friends.
All right, so I'm not going to go through the perspective taking questions for each of the videos, but we usually do that for all of our groups to help generate, help develop social cognition and theory of mind from our teens with autism spectrum disorders, okay? But in that one, we see that Alina corrected Allison for her grammar. And as most of us may have had this happen to us at one point, and I would say most of us usually don't like that happening to us. So that's something we find often in our population. A lot of our teens on the spectrum, they're very rule driven. So they like rules, they like to follow rules. So they also notice a lot of rule violations that other people may make. And when they notice that, they sort of feel compelled to point out these rule violations to their peers. But that doesn't really sit well with their peers, because friends don't want to feel corrected by their friends. So it kind of does become an obstacle in developing friendships. And we see this even with our young adults, when it comes to things like drinking or the things that they've known to they've heard is not good for your body or so it's really hard for them with the black and white thinking that comes along with autism spectrum disorders to kind of understand why their friends would engage in some of these behaviors even though they know that it's not necessarily good for them. Okay, so that's our next rule, which is don't police your friends. Now let's watch the next video to see what Alina does wrong this time.
Hey Allison, how was your weekend?
It was really good. How was yours?
It was good. What'd you do?
I went to dinner with my mom and stepdad.
Oh, your stepdad.
Yeah.
So your parents are divorced?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How old were you when that happened? That must have been hard for you.
12. Yeah, it kind of was. I don't really want to talk about it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just curious. So do you know why?
They don't really talk about it.
Oh, they didn't really tell you why?
No.
Okay, well, is that, hard for you?
Could we just change the subject?
Well, I'm just curious, So, do you hang out with your mom more or your dad?
I really hang out with both of them.
Okay. Is that, weird? Do they fight over you still?
No.
So, are you, closer with your mom or your dad?
I like both of them.
Okay. Well, do they tell you why?
No, we don't talk about it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just curious.
It looked like she got too personal. And we have to highlight to our teens on the spectrum that this is something that's okay to do with someone you're very close to, right? Once you develop a really close friendship with, they might talk about this with you when they are comfortable. So also, the other person is the one that tends to bring up their own personal information. But we do get a fair share of teens that sort of jump to this, and it comes out of curiosity or not picking up on social cues, like understanding that Allison was really uncomfortable in that situation. And she, in fact, mentioned a couple of times that she didn't want to talk about it and wanted to change the topic, but it didn't seem like Alina picked up on that was uncomfortable for her and that those questions were too personal. Okay, so that's the next rule. We'll say don't get too personal, especially initially in your friendships. Okay. Now let's watch the next one to see what Alina does wrong here.
Hey, Allison, how was your weekend?
It was good.
Oh, what'd you do?
Just went to the movies.
Oh, cool. What movie did you see?
That new sci-fi movie.
Oh, awesome. Did you like it?
Yeah.
Who'd you go with?
I don't know.
What else did you do after the movie?
So before we talk about what Alina did wrong there, we're going to watch one more role play to just tie into this same topic to see what Alina does wrong here.
What? How was my weekend? It was good. How was yours? What'd you do? I'm sorry. What'd you do? What did I do? Just went to the movies with some friends. Oh, cool. What movie did you see? Sorry. What movie did you see? Just a sci-fi movie. Oh, was it good? What? Was it good? Yeah, it was good.
These are some of the other conversational errors that we see, which are a little bit more nonverbal sort of in nature. And one of them includes volume control issues. So apart from kids on the spectrum who can vary between talking too loudly or speaking too softly, we get some other clinical populations that also tend to make these errors. So often we find, the ones that speak too loudly may have ADHD or kind of a bipolar-ish mood disorder going on. And it comes from like the speech pressure that's associated with some of these clinical conditions. And then, our anxious, maybe mildly more depressed kids tend to speak too softly. So we want to have them monitor their volume and use good volume control. And sometimes we actually have to give them feedback before they know that they're making the error. So we actually have to start out by letting them know, that was too loud. Let's use maybe an inside voice or let's kind of practice good volume control. And same with the speaking softly. We first have to give them feedback about what their volume is like. All right, couple of more conversation errors. Let's watch this next video to see what Alina does wrong here.
Hey, Jordan, how are you doing?
Fine.
How was your weekend?
I don't know. Fine.
What'd you do?
I don't know.
Have you seen that new sci-fi movie that just came out?
No.
It's really good.
Cool.
And again, we're going to watch one more video that's related to this topic.
Hey, Jordan, how are you doing?
Good.
How was your weekend?
It was fine.
What'd you do?
I don't know. Nothing.
Cool. Well, I went to see this really good new movie that just came out. It's that new sci-fi movie?
Sweet.
Have you heard of it?
No.
It was really good. The special effects were awesome.
Sweet.
So that brings us to the next conversational error, which is body boundary issues. So again, with kids on the autism spectrum, we may find that they fall on either of those sides of the error, which is either standing too close or standing too far away. But we also have these issues with other clinical populations. So again, kids with ADHD or mood disorders maybe stand too close to their peers, and kids with things like anxiety or depression or OCD tend to stand too far away. So this also comes from, not understanding social cues as well, right? So Jordan was clearly very uncomfortable in both of those situations, as we could tell from her facial expressions and body language. And it seemed like Alina was just not picking up on those as much, okay? So the rule we want to give our teens is use good body boundaries, and we give them an estimate of arm's length away. But we also have to highlight to them to not measure that arm's length away from their peers, because that would kind of be really odd and strange. So just in their mind's eye to think about, what an arm's length distance would be, and that's how close they want to be standing with the person that they are talking to. Last set of errors that we're going to look at. Let's watch this next one to see what Alina does wrong here.
Hey, Jordan, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. How was your weekend?
It was good. How was yours?
Good. What'd you do?
I went hiking with my family.
Oh, that's cool. I love hiking.
Yeah, me too.
Where'd you guys go?
Just a trail by my house.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
All right, and we'll just move into the next role play related to the same topic and see what Alina does wrong here as well.
Hey Jordan, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. How was your weekend?
It was good. How was yours?
Good. What'd you do?
I went hiking with my family.
Oh, that's cool. I love hiking.
Yeah, me too.
Where'd you guys go?
Just a trail by my house.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So when you have very little eye contact, you could appear very disinterested in that topic. It looks like you're distracted, you're not really interested in what the person has to say. And if it's too much eye contact, that makes the other person uncomfortable and seems kind of intrusive. Sometimes our teens will say it's like a little creepy stalker sort of behavior. So we want to make sure that they know that they're using good eye contact, because this is something that is challenging for a lot of our kids on the spectrum, especially modulating eye contact with their speech. So what we give them as a sort of an estimate is that, I'll demonstrate that for you guys. It's more like you look at the person for about 3 seconds and then you look away. So it's like you're talking, you look 1, 2, 3, and then you want to kind of look away to the side and then come back. So that's sort of how we have them start practicing using good eye contact that's comfortable for their peers, okay? All right, so now that we've talked about a lot of the errors that we often find with our population, we're going to move on to talk about what are the appropriate conversation skills that we want our teens to practice. So as you can see here, we've broken them down by steps, as I mentioned, and these are all the do's and don'ts that we create our rules around, okay? So the main topic here is that you want to be trading information with your peer, right? Because as we mentioned before, our goal is going to be in finding a common interest. So that means we have to trade information with the other person. So that's sort of 50-50 in the conversation. And you can do that by asking the person about himself or herself, and but not making it sort of that interview, right? So the way you can do that is by also answering your own question. So you ask the person about himself or herself, and then you don't have to wait for the person to ask you about yourself. You can just answer those questions about yourself, okay? And that's how you can find a common interest. So as I mentioned, we want to share the conversation. We try to give them sort of that estimate of 50%. We suggest that they ask open-ended questions. So not questions that are going to lead to yes or no answers from their peers, but rather, gives them more opportunity to share. So things like, what did you do this weekend? Or what do you like to do with your free time? Or what are your hobbies? Are sort of open-ended questions that lets the other person elaborate more on that topic. We then also want to point out that they should be asking some follow-up questions, right? So that shows interest to the other person. So if they tell you about their weekend, if you ask a follow-up question about that weekend, it shows that you're interested in what they have to say. But we don't want them to be repetitive. So don't keep asking questions about the same topic, or don't sort of interview them with question after question, okay? Another key point is that we want them to be listening to their friends. So don't be a conversation hog, listen to what your friend has to say, and give them the opportunity to talk in that conversation too. And then, as we mentioned, we want to be a little bit more serious when we first get to know someone. So we talked about not getting too personal when we know someone, but some other things that can be errors would be like making fun of the person, teasing them, kind of joking about them, because we just you don't usually have know much about the other person's sense of humor very early on in your friendship with them or conversation with them. So we want to be mindful of that. We want to be mindful of not offending our peers. So we always suggest that they're more serious and talk about more serious topics initially. But we also don't want them to talk about things that can be too serious, like politics or religion, things that are very personal to a person, right? Because that could open up opportunities for arguments, and we don't want them to be argumentative with their friends. We also want to be mindful, them to be mindful that they're not bragging with their friends, because that's not really going to help them build a conversation or want the person to continue talking with them in the future. Okay, so these are sort of our main steps and rules to follow when they're talking to their peers one-on-one. So now let's watch this next role play and see what Alina does right this time in following the steps to having a conversation with her friend.
Hey Allison, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm really good. How was your weekend?
It was really nice. How was yours?
It was great. I actually went to the movies.
Oh, cool. What did you see?
I saw that new sci-fi movie.
Oh, I've been wanting to see that.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Have you seen the first one?
I did. I saw the first one. I need to see the second one.
Yeah, the first one was good too.
Yeah.
Do you think they'll make another one?
I hope so.
I know, right? I really hope so.
Yeah. Did you read the books at all?
I read the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I read all of the books, so I really hope they make a third.
Yeah, I really want to read the rest of the books.
You should.
Yeah. But you should definitely see the movie. The special effects are so good.
I know. They do a really good job.
Yeah.
All right, so then this time with our perspective taking questions, we'll go around again and we'll ask our teens, what was that like for the other person? And usually for this one, they'll say something like, well, normal, pleasant, it was fine. What did she do right? She followed all the steps. She was trading information. She was sharing the conversation. She was asking questions about her friend and then listening to the answers. And then she was also answering some questions about herself. And it didn't really look like she made any of the errors we had pointed out before. So then we asked them, what did she think of Alina this time? And they might say, oh, she thought she was nice. She was pleasant, friendly. And then we'll ask, would she want to talk to Alina again? And they said, probably. It sounded like they had some common interests that they identified through that conversation, like the sci-fi movie and the books possibly, so they could, hang out and do something related to that common interest. Okay. All right. So those were all our errors and kind of good steps to follow when we're talking to another person one-on-one. Now, when we're talking about group conversations, the rules change a little bit. So we also have to teach this separately from the one-on-one conversations, okay, to our teens. So we started by asking our teens, what are most children or teens told to do when they meet new people by well-meaning adults. So most adults will tell their teens, just go say hi, go introduce yourself, go up to the group and say hi and wave at them. And that's actually not what most teens do in the real world. In fact, that's not what most adults do in the real world. If you think about what you do at a party, there's a group, you don't sort of just join the group and say hi and I'm so-and-so, because that can be a little bit odd. And we want to think about what do children and teens with autism spectrum disorders often do when they meet people, especially if they get that advice, right? They might go interrupt a conversation, which kind of already gets them started out on a bad foot then with that group. So, we'll talk about what the appropriate steps are, but first let's watch the next role play to see what Alina does wrong in entering this group conversation.
Hey Jordan, you'll never guess. I saw Gabe at my favorite sushi restaurant this weekend.
No way, what restaurant was it?
Just the one right around the corner.
Oh, I've been meaning to try that place.
Yeah.
I felt bad that I'd never gone, but I went and it was so good.
Nice, what did you guys get?
I got the spicy tuna with crispy rice.
Yeah, it looked awesome.
Have you guys ever been roller skating?
Sorry, I just got the regular salmon
There's
roll.
this new skate park that just opened up. It's really fun.
What did you get?
Just the salmon roll. It was plain, but
They have
so
a Thursday
good.
night student night. A lot of people go to it.
I've been meaning to go there. I really
Yeah.
wanted to try it out.
It's really fun. There's also this other place
What would you
by the
get if
beach
you went?
that I've been roller skating.
I'm sorry, what?
If you went.
It's really cool. It's like right by the water and lots of people go.
So again, we'll do our perspective taking questions for the group conversations. Our kids may say, when we ask them what was that like for the group, that was weird, odd, they were kind of interrupted. What did the group think of Alina? They thought she was strange, maybe rude, for interrupting? And would the group want to talk to Alina again? Probably not. They didn't really actually identify any common interests either, so they wouldn't know what to talk to her about the next time. So the steps that we want them to follow for entering group conversations include first, watching and listening. So what that means is they might be watching from a slight distance. We suggest using a prop. That can be very helpful. Most of us actually do this sort of naturally with our phones. So cell phones are a really good sort of prop to use while you're watching and listening for the topic. So that's what they're really doing while they are using this prop, is listening for the topic of conversation. We then want them to identify a common interest. And that means that we want them to identify a topic that's part of the conversation that they maybe know something about, they maybe have questions about, that they can join the conversation based on, okay? Once they've identified that topic, we then want them to make periodic eye contact. So kind of, the 3 seconds, you look, you sort of look away, keep looking. That to the group suggests that you're interested in what they're talking about. And then we always say, watch to see if you know someone in that conversation. Because if you know someone already that's part of that group, they're more likely to accept you into that group. So that's always a nice way to kind of get in on conversations. And then we say, make sure that they're talking nicely, right? So we don't want them to be entering group conversations that might be too personal or that might be too argumentative. So we want to make sure that they're watching out for what kind of conversation is really taking place. Then we want them to wait for a pause in conversation. And there's never going to be a perfect pause, right? In the real world, there's no perfect pauses, but we just want to make sure that they might wait for one person to finish talking and before the other person starts talking, instead of interrupting the conversation. And so once they've waited for the pause, immediately after, we want them to move closer. Again, we're following the arm's length away rule. We don't want them to be screaming from across the room to the group. So we want to move closer and then join the conversation on topic. So make a comment or ask a question that is on topic of that group conversation, right? So let's watch this next role play and see what Alina does right in entering this group conversation.
So Jordan, you'll never guess, I saw Gabe at my favorite sushi restaurant this weekend.
Nice. What restaurant was it?
Just the one right around the corner.
Oh, I've been meaning to check that place out.
Yeah, it's so close by and I'd never gone, but I went and it was really good.
Cool. What did you guys get?
I got a spicy tuna roll and I loved it.
Oh, yeah.
You got the spicy tuna roll? That's what I always get.
Yeah, how good is it?
It's so good there. Have you guys tried the rainbow roll there?
I haven't. No, I actually got the salmon roll.
Oh, okay. That's good too, but
Yeah.
the rainbow roll is like their specialty.
I'll try it.
Cool.
Yeah.
If you were gonna go, what'd you get?
I love the California roll. It's my favorite.
I've tried that one there actually. It's really good.
Nice.
All right, so then after we've done this role play, we want to ask them what Alina did right in that group, entering that group conversation. They'll say, well, she did everything right. She was using a prop. She was listening to the topic. She started looking over once it seemed like she knew what they were talking about. And then when she kind of had the opportunity, that brief pause to get in on, she moved closer and joined in on topic. And then we asked, what was that like for the group? They would say normal, pleasant. What did the group think of Alina? They thought she was nice, she was friendly. Would the group want to talk to Alina again? Probably it sounded like they were kind of making plans potentially about checking out some other sushi restaurant. So that's likely. All right. So apart from knowing what to do, what are the steps to follow, we also want to make sure our teens are paying attention to nonverbal cues of interest in conversations. So we ask them, what do most children and teens with autism spectrum disorders know when they are accepted or not accepted into a conversation? And oftentimes they're not, because as we mentioned before, reading social cues can be challenging for them, right? So we talk to our teens about paying attention to 3 key factors in assessing interest during conversational entry. So first is the verbal signs, which is, are they talking to you? And if they are they talking nicely to you, asking you questions, right? The bad answers would be, well, are they giving you short responses? They're not asking you questions, like the group did with Alina in the bad role play. Then we want to be paying attention to eye contact. So are they looking at you? And if they are looking at you, they should be smiling, nodding, making good eye contact. Versus if it's not going well, they might be looking confused, making faces, rolling their eyes, or not making any eye contact at all. And then finally, we also want them to pay attention to body language. So are they facing you? And that means, do they open the circle? Like, so open the shoulder, turn towards you, include you into the group. Versus the bad signs would be they close the circle. So they kind of give you the cold shoulder, as we say, and maybe slightly start turning away from you, closing the circle away from you, okay? So after we've talked to them about errors and entering the different types of group conversation situations, we also want to make sure our teens know how to exit group conversations, right? Because they're going to be different for when things don't go well versus when they do go well. So there's 3 different situations we talk about. So the first one is exiting conversations when they were never accepted into the group. So that would be like when Alina was talking about rollerblading and the group was talking about sushi, and they never really included her in that conversation, right? So what we want them to do during that time is, the most important thing would be to keep their cool, not throw a tantrum, not get too upset, do things that would draw even more negative attention to them. So that's the part that our teens do tend to struggle with the most too. So is keeping their cool. So they have to keep their cool. Then we want them to start looking away, turning away, and walking away from the group or the person that they were talking to. And this all is supposed to happen pretty quickly. We do have to point out to our teens that you want to look, turn, and walk away in the same direction, right? So you also want to make sure you're doing this not towards a wall, because if you look and turn towards a wall, it's going to be hard for you to walk away from that. So make sure you kind of know what your exit is, look in that direction, turn in that direction, and walk away in that same direction. Then you have situations where you have to exit conversations where you might initially have been accepted and then excluded, right? So this happens again to a lot of us. You might join in appropriately, you might start speaking on topic, but then the group might move on to another topic that you don't know much about, or they're not interested in having you share your opinions about. So you sort of have to exit that conversation at that point. So the steps initially are similar. You keep your cool, you look away. Then this time we want them to wait for a brief pause. Again, there's no perfect pauses, just like a little brief pause in the conversation. And when they get that pause, we want them to use a very brief cover story for leaving. So just see ya, take care, gotta go. And the reason for that is we want them to give a brief cover story because they were initially accepted into the conversation. So it would look odd for them to just leave without saying anything. That would be too abrupt. But at the same time, we don't want them to give them a long story about, well, I gotta go, I have class, and then I have to go do this, because you've been excluded at that point and they don't really care about what's going on next, okay? So just a very brief cover story, 2-3 words, as you can see here, and then you walk away. And then finally, we have a situation where we exit conversations when we're fully accepted into that conversation. So this is going to be a little bit different. Here, we first just wait for a pause. And this time, we want them to give a specific cover story for leaving. So not the brief cover story, not just, okay, gotta go, bye, because that would be abrupt, again, if you were fully accepted into the conversation. So we actually want them to give a specific cover story for leaving that's accurate. We don't want them to lie or make up stories, because that could get them into trouble later. But, you could say, okay, I gotta go because I have class now. Or, okay, I need to leave because my ride is here, or whatever it is. Again, specific, but not too long. Then you say, you'll see them later, or maybe make plans for later, say goodbye, and then walk away. All right. So those are all our entry and exit strategies for conversations. And just to wrap up that, I do want to point out some of the resources we have. So we have a bunch of different guides and manuals available through our program. We have the original treatment manual for teens with autism spectrum disorders and other developmental disorders. This teen manual has been adapted for a South Korean population. So that's been published and available in that language. Okay. We also have a school-based curriculum for educators, and this is similar to the teen treatment manual, same topics, same skills, but it's broken down to be adapted for the school setting. Okay. Other resources that we have include a friend maker app that's available through any of the Apple stores, smart tablet kind of Google Store and things like that. I believe it's 99 cents, but it has all of our role play videos and all of the main topics to follow. So a lot of our teens use this during the week to highlight, kind of review the steps that they need. Okay. We also have a young adult manual that we recently published for young adults on the spectrum that is pretty similar to the teen manual, but includes some lessons on dating as well. And then the Science of Making Friends is a parent resource. It's a book for parents to help their teens or young adults with social challenges.
We have a lot of questions today, so we've got about 15 minutes. So I'll start reading some of the questions. One of the first ones, some people are asking about how they can get enrolled in peers. So they're either for someone themselves or for somebody that they know. So maybe you could address it for if they're in LA, but also if they're not in LA, how they find out where it's offered.
Right. So on this last slide that I have up here, I have contact information for our clinic at UCLA. And so if you were interested in enrolling someone at the UCLA PEERS program, you could contact us on our website or the phone number that's listed here. And the process is there is a little bit of a screening and intake process to figure out if this is the appropriate fit for the teen or the young adult in question that the coordinators of the program can give you more information about, okay? For people outside of the LA area, if you go on our website, which is listed right here, you can find a tab that says PEERS Certified Providers. So those are people, mental health providers that have been have undergone a 3-day workshop with us at UCLA to become certified in providing peers as a treatment. So if you go to that link, there is, I think it's broken down by each state. So you'll see all of the list of certified providers within each state and that are applying the peers program in their own practice.
Okay, and related to that, I have a question here about younger kids. I believe you have programs for young kids as well. So could you touch on that?
Right, so we have a program called Peers for Preschoolers. That's for kids aged 4 to 6 years old. And that takes place at UCLA. So those are also friendship skills, mostly play skills at that age. It involves parents just like all of our other programs. And it's 16 weeks just like all of our other programs. So that's for that age group. Between the ages of 7 and 11, there is actually another program at UCLA. It's called the Children's Friendship Program. And that program is very similar to the PEERS program. It's in fact the parent program of PEERS. So they serve that age group of sort of elementary and some middle school kids.
So they can look on your website and find information about all of that.
Right. If you wanted to find the Children's Friendship Group, you just type in, you can Google UCLA Children's Friendship Program and they will come up.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I've got some specific questions about the topic that we talked about today, which was conversation skills. This is a great question. This is a therapist is asking, I'm trying to help my student understand reputation, and that even after watching these videos, students may not change their attitudes toward them, even if they change their strategies. What I'm afraid of is that he'll get discouraged and lose faith in the accuracy of what I'm trying to teach him because of the experiences he's having with students he already interacted with. So
right.
What about that, repairing reputation and rebuilding?
So we do have some lessons on repairing reputations, but that's something that we can only do if the teens themselves are willing to want to change, right? If they recognize that they have a certain reputation and that they want to change it. We can guide them through the steps for doing that appropriately. Other people's reactions and reputation to your reputation is something that is not in our control. So we have to emphasize that to our teens, that it's something that's not in our control, unfortunately. But what we tell them is friendship is a choice, right? So they can make a choice to not have to interact with those people that are not responding to them the way they would like them to respond to them. So that's sort of one aspect of it. But really, the other aspect of it sounds like it's going to be more about finding appropriate sources of friends for this teen, where they do feel successful and they do feel accepted. So, we want to talk to them a lot more about kind of identifying what their interests are, what their kind of group of people is going to be, their tribe, if we can say so, that they're going to be more included and accepted in. And those are the kids that they should be trying these skills with. And sometimes, honestly, we do this with our clinical groups here. Sometimes school might not be the appropriate place to find that peer group. If they have a reputation already that's becoming an obstacle for them to connect with their peers, or they're being teased or bullied about it, then school is not necessarily the appropriate place for that source of friends.
So you can encourage a student to view school as an academic resource and then make their close social connections outside of school.
Exactly. So I would encourage them to actually, based on their interests, find an extracurricular sort of activity that is where they are going to find like-minded people. They're going to find people that are accepting of them. And that's usually what we do for our teens in our clinical groups here.
Okay. So another question here is for people over 21. Is peers geared strictly towards teens, and adults have different resources, or?
Right. So we have a Peers for Young Adults program, and that is for young adults. Well, we call them young adults, but it's like 18 and over, really. So that would be where a 21-year-old would be more appropriate, right? So as I highlighted in the resource slide, we do have a published manual for young adults. We do provide certified trainings to certified providers on the young adult treatment. A lot of it is very similar to the teen program. They tend to make the same sort of conversational errors. Everything you saw today in the conversation slides is pretty applicable to adults as well. The things that are different in the adult program is the emphasis on dating, because a lot of our adults are interested in building romantic relationships. So we have a few lessons that guide them towards dating, assessing romantic interests, and setting up dates and following up on that. And that tends to replace our lessons on bullying and cyberbullying. That is more of like a teen social requirement.
So as far as, I've got so many questions here. Somebody's asking about a brief cover story. So what that would sound like. So if you were teaching a brief cover story about why you need to leave, I know in the video she said something like, oh, I have to go, my ride's here.
Right. So we do, we'll say a brief cover story is what they use if they were initially accepted and then excluded. So that would be very brief. At that point would just be, okay, got to go, see you later, or take care, see you around. And we generate those 4 or 5 different options. And we usually suggest that our teens stick to those options, because they might want to try out their own brief cover stories, which is, they might not be the greatest at coming up with. Like it might be too long or off topic or something like that, that makes it stand out more, makes it seem more odd. So they can certainly consult with the adults in their life, their providers, teachers, parents, on what would be an appropriate brief cover story. But that's something that we usually recommend that they stick to what we taught them about, okay? And then in contrast, we have the specific cover story, which is what you give someone when you were fully accepted and have to leave. And that's where you might say, okay, gotta go because my ride is here, or see you later because I have to go to class now. So you actually have to give a little bit of a reason for why you have to leave.
Okay. Here's a question about generalization. This parent's saying, my son loves these types of programs. He does really well, but getting it going in public is harder.
Right. So this is a weekly program. We do see our teens only once a week. that's why we have parent involvement in our program. And parent involvement in our program is one of the main factors for success, because during the week, we don't have as much control of what's happening in the teen's life. And that's why we coach our parents on the same set of skills to coach them on, teach them how to coach their teens during the week, so that they can take charge of coaching them through those real life situations during the week. Okay, that's one piece. The other piece is we have very structured homework assignments every week, and we place a lot of emphasis on homework, and we want our teens to make sure that they're completing homework every week. Because coming to a class once a week and enjoying it while you're there is great, but it's not going to translate to your everyday life if you're not practicing it regularly. So the practice piece is really another key factor in success. So we do find that our teens that are really motivated to do homework and complete their homework assignments that we give through our program show higher rates of success. So the homework assignments are very structured, and they relate closely to the topic that was taught that week. So if it's the conversation skills, we want them to be practicing that initially maybe with their parents, but then go on to practice that with maybe classmates or people in their social groups or extracurricular activities during the week.